What can Kingdom Hearts teach us about the dichotomy or trichotomy of man? That's right, we're finally doing another Kingdom Hearts episode. It's been a couple years, weirdly enough. You hear me talk about it enough. Today we're going to be discussing some of the villains, the heartless, the nobodies, and the unversed from the Kingdom Hearts series. And we're going to be comparing some of the lore of those villains to theologies of man. This is going to be a little bit of a theology heavy episode for the Priest of the Geeks. So be checking in, be ready for this. Guys, I am Joshua Noel. I am here with one of your favorites, the most common host of the show, Spidey himself, the one whom Peter Parker strives to be, the only Christian Ashley.
And that's pretty high praise. I'll
Christian,
take it.
Yeah. I was gonna say I was waiting for something a little bit more than just you just kind of. Let's try this again. The one and only Christian Ashley.
You can't do any better.
The best part, guys, is Christian couldn't hear all the cheering and applause that I just made happen.
Yeah,
and
my headphones don't work that way apparently right now.
It was funny. Just trust me. We're here with a great guest. Her husband's been on before, John Erdely. His wife is now here with us, Barbra Erdely. I don't know why. That was so many syllables. I'm just not intelligent enough to do that.
It's not that hard to pronounce.
Right first time.
Yeah. It's just one of those where I'm like, why didn't, my tongue just didn't want to move that much, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. That's
Barbra,
one of many decisions. Barbra just kind of goes, and then, why did I choose this life?
I just go with it.
Choose that loser.
I keep trying to say Barbra instead of Barbara, and I don't know
Barbra.
why. Yeah. Anyway, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Oh, wait. We got to try that one again, too. Barbra Erdely. Christian has no idea what's going on here.
If you're playing something, I can't hear it.
Oh, great stuff. Well, guys, if you're listening to this, you enjoy the content we put out, then we do ask if you can to rate and review the show, Podchaser, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, smash that like and subscribe button, as Will says. And let's go ahead and round circle. What are we all geeking out on? I'll go ahead and start. Madeline Miller. We talked about her during the short story, and now I'm like deep into Song of Achilles, and I'm already queuing up her next book to order, which I think is the only other one, which makes me very sad because I'm like, when this one ends, I don't want there to be any of that awkward pause time between books. Like, I want to immediately pick up the next one. Christian,
Nice.
What you been geeking out on, man?
Yeah. I like I mentioned last time we recorded, am on Birth by Sleep still. So I'm on Aqua's section. I'm almost done. My girl Aqua, loving her story again. We playing through that. So that's what I'm geeking out on.
Nice. And Barb, what about you? What have you been doing lately?
Well, John and I just discovered this new app called Whatnot. And so I've been watching all the live streamers sell Pokemon cards. So I've been going back and playing my old black game. Pokemon.
Fantastic. Very nice. Well, guys, let's go ahead and jump into this episode. I couldn't be more excited. If you've listened for any time at all, you know that like my main geekdoms, we got Pirates, we got Doctor Who, which have been really relevant lately, and Kingdom Hearts, which we just don't get to do enough episodes on. It's very sad. Please ask for more so that I can convince the other hosts that I have to do this more frequently. Before we jump into it, let's go over some of our histories with Kingdom Hearts. If you don't know, I've been playing this since I was 10. I waited when the third game came out. Let me tell you how much I'm into Kingdom Hearts. I played every single game that's been out every single year since I was 10, which now is a lot of games I have to play every year. And this year I'm doing it twice. And when the third game came out, I saved up money and I bought a brand new TV and couch and everything. I saved up my PTO because I knew a year ahead of time. And I was like, I'm taking a week off and this is all I'm doing. This is it, guys. So I can't, I actually think it might be impossible for me to overstress how much I love this video game series. Christian, what's some of your history with this?
Well, as a kid, I knew it existed. I remember seeing like some advertisements for it, but I was at that age of like, this is kind of dorky and not for me. This is obviously just for kids, so I never played it then. Then in college, my buddy, roommate Cameron, a mutual friend of all of us here, was playing the
Mhm.
Rechain of Memories from the remix on the main TV in our apartment. I was like, oh, I recognize those guys. Okay, that's kind of weird. And then moving on with my life, and what, maybe I'll try it myself. Did that. Played the first couple games, fell in love, kept playing it over and over again. I'm thinking this would be my. I know nothing compared to Joshua's. My third go through of the entire franchise. I love this
It's
series so
far more
much.
normal. There's a far more normal fan there. Um, I am absolutely the extreme. Yeah. There's got to be very few people who love it the way I love it. Barb, what is your history with Kingdom Hearts?
I want to say I'm more like you. I started playing it when I was 10.
Yes.
I played almost have played every single game. The only ones I haven't played are the side stories on the phone or the Game Boy.
Oh yeah, those are hard. Yeah, I don't do the phone ones. When I say I played every one every year, I skip the phone ones because it's impossible to beat them.
They exist.
They're like in a side realm
for the
yeah.
whole game.
I do watch
it explains
movie.
nothing. It explains nothing.
I've only been able to play Kingdom Hearts 3 once completely through because 3 kids, not enough time.
Yeah, that's valid.
But all of the other ones I think I've played through enough times that John has finally asked me to stop. I'm not allowed to play it when he's in the house.
That's yeah. My wife is just like, I'm gonna take a nap. Go turn Kingdom Hearts on because she knows there's zero chance of me bothering her if Kingdom Hearts is on.
Well, my youngest wants me to play it all the time now.
Beautiful.
Well, he's not here. I can play it.
That's a great reason to have children.
To
play Kingdom Hearts again.
Oh, she's 2.5, but she recognizes Mickey and all the other Disney characters.
Yeah.
And so she wants me to play it for that.
Especially now that 3 has like Tangled and Frozen and stuff too. So now it's like relevant for younger kids too, which that was the thing. A lot of people kind of hated on Kingdom Hearts 3 because it was a lot easier, and it was, but I feel like it was a good entry point for kids, which is definitely what the game was originally intended for. Actually, I think Kingdom Hearts has the same problem Doctor Who has. If y'all have ever heard the slogan of "It's too dark for kids, too silly for adults." Well, yeah, you know.
Don't hate me, but I have never seen Doctor Who.
Oh, well, just trust me that's accurate.
That's okay.
It's one of my two watch things, though.
Yeah, which now is actually a really good time to get into it because they're kind of like resetting a lot of stuff. Yeah,
it's on
fun story.
Disney Plus now, I think.
Oh yeah, the specials are on Disney Plus, and whenever they start the series back up, it's going to be which I'm excited for. Nice. Yeah, fun story. This will be it for our background with Kingdom Hearts. I have to share. When I think I was in middle school, I went to our church's camp, and you don't sleep when you're at camp. I don't know if anybody knows that, but you don't sleep. And I was always, because of where my birthday fell, I was like in that awkward where I could go to 9 to 11, or I could go to 11 and 13. And I had one of my best friends who was on the younger ones, and one of my best friends were in the older ones when I was a kid. So I just did both. So I just went for 2 weeks and just didn't sleep at all. And then my parents were going to teach the next camp, so they weren't going to be home. So when I came back, I had to go to one of my best friend's house, who was also our pastor's house. And they have like a whole basement where we could hang out. And I fell asleep while having him play Kingdom Hearts, because I used to make all of my friends play. It was like a requirement to be my friend, I think. So I just brought Kingdom Hearts with me everywhere I went. And literally, according to him, I can't testify, but he's a pretty honorable guy. According to him, I fell asleep and proceeded to still tell him where to go. He was like, "You were playing the game in your sleep. You were like, next is this room, next is this." And I was like, "I didn't even know what you were talking about." And somehow it lined up. I was like, cool. So that's my attachment. I play it in my sleep, apparently. Or used to. And today, we're actually, weirdly enough, we're not going to be talking about the plots of the games or our favorite game moments or anything like that, which I'm sure they'll come up because they're just all so good and beautiful and wonderful. And I'm just platinumed up Kingdom Hearts 2 for the first time. And honestly, I just love Pete's edition. I'm not going to sit on it, but man, when Pete shows up and you have this like villain who's just as villainy as Maleficent, but also just a goofball, you're like, yeah, this is classic Disney right here. Oh, good stuff. Actually, yeah, did any of y'all want to just is there any moments you just want to uplift real quick before we jump into the meat of this? They weren't expecting this.
Yeah,
If I
yeah.
had a clock noise, I'd play
That's
it.
always good. I have to go through how many games to find one specific moment?
Yeah, I mean, just anything that just randomly pops in your head. Doesn't have to be a
No,
favorite moment.
my favorite moment is definitely when in the first game when Sora was retrieving Kyrie's heart. I want to say that's one of the only times I've ever cried playing a video game, and I was 10.
Mm.
Man, I get that. Honestly, if I was to pick a favorite moment, I think it's when after Riku has gone through everything in Chain of Memories and he's kind of gone through where he's going to go on the dark path, but he wants to be a good guy still. When he
Oh,
finally gets
right.
reunited again with Sora. And then you go
Oh,
through everything with
yeah.
like Dreamed Off Distance and you're like, oh man, the fact that Riku made it back, like, because it wasn't a true, like, I guess it was a redemption arc, but it wasn't a true redemption arc. It wasn't like he was ever completely evil. He was never completely evil. He just had
Right.
to go through a different path. And when he finally made it back, you're like, oh, yeah, it was just very rewarding. Okay,
Yeah,
this apparently
I
is
think
favorite moment time.
I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's one that came up while I was thinking, and it's in 3 where Riku, Mickey, and Sora have all gone to the realm of darkness to retrieve Aqua. They've finally managed to get her after she's been in there for 10 years,
Yeah, that was
and you
incredible.
feel that hope that you knew that they were gonna do it, but it finally happens, and that feels pretty dang good to experience and to be the one to help actually bring that about as you're playing.
Oh yeah, yeah. And the thing is, Kingdom Hearts fans, it's not one of the biggest fandoms or anything like that. But people who are fans typically are like some of the most loyal fans of any fandom. Like they're like really into it. Like the amount of websites that are just fan sites of Kingdom Hearts is just wild for a thing that's really not that big to merit that many sites. Um, but even like for those of us like me and Barbara, I don't know if Christian had the same experience, but when I'm 10, Kingdom Hearts 2 didn't come out that far after Kingdom Hearts 1. But then you have this like 12-year gap that you're waiting. You're waiting for Kingdom Hearts 3. Every year you're checking E3 to be like, did they finally announce it? Did they finally announce it? Did they finally? And even me, I didn't care that much about romance, but I'm like, gosh darn it, I just want to see Sora and Kairi finally get together. I spent literally half my life by the time it came out. Because it came out, I was like 28. I was like, I spent 14 years or something. I'm like, I've been waiting for this for Sora and Kairi to get together. And then they only kind of get back together. And you're like, I guess I'm waiting again.
Yeah.
And I'm not upset about it for some reason. I'm
You've
just
been
like, okay.
demurred.
Oh man. So let's get to today's actual topic. We're going to be kind of focusing on the bad guys, not just the main bad guys. You have your main bad guys of like yeah, you have your main bad guys where it's Maleficent, right? You have Pete from Disney stuff. You have Hades is a bad guy. You have Ansem who's having the Heartless. Like there are main villains. But in a video game, you have these like little guys that you have to fight along the way because otherwise it's just boring. You're just trying to find Hades. No, you got to fight something along the way to get to Hades, right? So the mechanic they choose for this, where originally it was just the Heartless. Later we will discover something called the Nobodies, and then after that, you kind of discover the Unversed, and they kind of play a much more minor role. And it's kind of like, does that really count? Today we're counting it because we're also going to be debating dichotomy and trichotomy of man and soul and spirit, and we're going to get into some weird, funky theology stuff. It's going to be great. But a quick breakdown, Christian, when someone becomes a heartless nobody whatever, how do these things get created? Let's start with like the basics and then we'll dive in a little bit more detail.
Okay. As with many things in Kingdom Hearts, this is just so difficult to explain because there's 2 different types of Heartless. There's the pure bloods they're the ones that are just naturally born from the darkness that exists in everyone's heart. So they're the ones you're going to typically see in like the realm of darkness. Then we have the emblem Heartless, and these are like artificially created. So probably something Xehanort did brought them about. So that's most of the time what you're going to see. Both of them, excuse me, I think which ones actually have a heart? I, sometimes it's both, sometimes it's just one. I think Emblem, you're probably going to see more hearts in them. And they kind of come into being when Heartless invade a world. They kill a person, and that separates their heart from them because the Heartless are always seeking after hearts to try and reunite themselves back to where they used to be, and creating more Heartless in the process. And that's why the Keyblade is able to when they destroy a heartless, they're reuniting that heart back to where it originally came from. And I'm sure there's 50 different lore pieces I've
The
forgotten
Kingdom
that
Hearts.
very, but there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think the
Kingdom Hearts,
basic breakdown, if you were to become a Heartless, because the emblems I think were created. You said Xehanort. For those who don't know, mad scientist guy who wants to control all of the spirit realm of basically is kind of what you're getting at. It's weird. Explaining Xehanort's an entire separate episode. He's just a bad guy
no,
who can
Joshua,
try to create his own
it's
things.
it's simple. Everyone is either Sora, Kyrie, or Xehanort. Everyone,
Everyone is one of those
even
three
Donald and
people.
Goofy.
Okay,
Goofy
he's
told Xehanort.
exaggerating, but it is kind of a problem where a lot of times you find out, oh, wait, that was actually just Sora, but his nobody. Oh, that was just Sora, but he's heartless. So that was just Sora, but, in a different timeline. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. But when we're going to be talking about these three things, if I, right now, let the darkness in my heart kind of take over me, my heart itself, my heart becomes a heartless, which makes no sense. The body that gets left behind, the shell, becomes a nobody. So my body is a nobody, my heart is a heartless. The unversed don't happen from that. My understanding is the unversed occur when you have really strong emotions. Those emotions can become the unversed. Is that a correct understanding?
Negative.
If either of y'all remember?
Negative emotions.
Yeah, yeah.
And they came about because of Xehanort experimenting on Ventus, which split him into Ventus and Vanitas, which is kind of like the darkness inside of Ventus. And because of the way Vanitas was made, his negative emotions was so big, the unverse kind of came out of that, and they spread.
Yeah, and Ventus is one of the main characters of one of the side games, basically, right? I mean, that's all I need to
Birth
know.
by Sleep.
Okay, yeah. Barbara, did you have anything to add as far as just like the basics? Do we kind of nail it, or
you kind of nailed it, but as far as I understood, in order to create a nobody, when the heart is taken from your body, you have to be of strong will.
Oh yeah,
like a very strong-willed person. So then it's like everybody who has their heart taken away from them, they either have their bodies disappear, and then the ones who are left behind are the ones of strong will. That's what I got from it.
Yeah. Well, which interesting. That's also why you get some of summons. So in the first game and second game, some different things, you can summon like Simba or some of the Genie's weird. We don't count Genie in this conversation, but
always
Simba,
use Tinkerbell.
Stitch, different ones. Tinkerbell's a good one.
Oh yes.
And they'll come from worlds that were consumed by the darkness, but their spirit, not their heart, their spirit was so strong that there was kind of like a fragment left behind. So you're able to summon Simba because his spirit was stronger than, his heart or the world or whatever else there. So you're able to kind of use that magic to have him join you in the fight. And then later when you see him in Kingdom Hearts 2 and his world's back, he still recognizes you. So it's not like his spirit was a completely detached thing. He still had real experiences with the character. For those who don't know, Simba is the main character of Lion King. I feel like people know that one. I'm not going to explain the Disney characters. I'll explain the other ones for you. But if you don't know the Disney ones, that's on you. All right, so then let's jump in. Let's talk about the Heartless. How do you guys feel? Let's start with Barbara. How do you feel about the idea, the very concept of a Heartless, of darkness being able to consume you so much that the darkness becomes your heart and becomes a separate entity?
I mean, I can see that happening even in our world today, because you have people who go through very dark experiences, whether it's heartbreak or just evil itself. I can see the point where, like, say in the video game, someone who's just very depressed can be swallowed by the darkness, and then whether or not they have a strong will is a different story, but I suppose it just depends on the level of darkness itself as to what kind of heartless they would turn into. I know the most common one is the shadow, the one that you have on the screen, but you also have I think they're the soldiers and the warriors and things like that, but it's very common to see nowadays, even in just, walking outside or.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so we're going to talk about real world. You definitely see someone who maybe enjoyed a little bit of alcohol here and there, maybe enjoyed, a little bit of this, and then slowly, gambling, whatever. it's not just addiction. I mean, there are other things. I think lying, different things like this, where you started and it was kind of innocent. Maybe you told a lie to save someone's feelings, whatever else, and eventually it builds up and builds up. And we see stories where someone's become a completely different person after they let this kind of consume them. Yeah, yeah. Christian, do you have anything as like the practical end, or even like the game end, and you're just like, I want to know whose heart was it that became that big fat thing that I couldn't hit in Agrabah, who was blowing fireballs at me? Like, who was that? Whose heart? I mean, did they just have really bad cholesterol? Like, why was he fiery? Why was he huge? What's going on here?
Yeah, for all the problems they caused me, they kind of deserve to die. No, and a heartless, and a lot of other these things too. Of Nobody's Unversed. They're kind of similar to the way, not a one to one of like the tulpa or the sprolpa you kind of get from Tibetan Buddhism, that idea of a thought being created by the ideas in your head, or like the thoughts in your head. Like I said, not a one to one, but the heartless being made from your heart, from what is inside of you. The evil inside of you creates this being, or the nobody. Your heart is, your body and soul are just that strong, and you're able to act after death, but you're left without what actually made you a human being. I really enjoy experiencing that part of the game, because you can just play these games and move on with your life, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just have fun with the game. Or you can get deeper into the lore and look at these things, and it gives you a better appreciation for what's happening on screen, as convoluted as things get. And I love convoluted things, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those. Speaking of things you could ignore, it's actually when you're playing the second games, when you first encounter the nobodies, which is also a little bit infuriating for me because you're already 2 games in before Kingdom Hearts 2, and it's like, where were these things the whole time? Like all of a sudden this just shows up. But hey, with video games, they had different ideas later than what they started with, and they just kind of changed things as they went. And what's interesting is you meet the nobodies, then you're taken to it's not Merlin. Who is the Yensid?
Yen
Yensid's
Sid.
castle, am I thinking right? Yeah, I didn't know if I pronounced his name right. But when you get up there, he starts explaining who Heartless and Nobodies are. And you actually have little books that you can open and you can learn all about the histories of the Heartless and the Nobodies. Christian, what's well, did we start with Barbara last time? I don't remember who we started with last time. Christian, you want to go ahead and let everybody know, as far as the nobodies and this concept of not everybody has a strong enough will. Actually, I think it's perfect for him to talk about, because this is a theme in a lot of Marvel stuff. Spider-Man's able to conquer a lot and be as powerful as he is because why? Willpower. Willpower is its own magical, cool thing, and your will can keep your body alive without you. It's very interesting in these games. Break this down. How does
Yeah.
this work? What makes sense to you? What doesn't make sense? And do we see any kind of like we talked about Heartless, where we're going to see people getting taken over in this world? Do we see anything similar to a nobody in our world? Like as far as like I don't know, real practical thing that's like, oh yeah, that exists in our world, just different.
It's a very Japanese idea. Not to say it's exclusively Japanese, but that whole heroic spirit kind of idea of there's enough in me to where I have a will. I can overcome these obstacles if I just believe in myself, or if I just have my friends beside me. Your typical shonen protagonist is going to be that guy who just, if I just believe in my friends and faith and anime Jesus or whatever, I can do whatever I want to do. And they didn't transpose that idea into, hey, I have that will, but it's still not enough for me to stay whole, creating this body outside of my body that has taken on my form somewhat and has no real will of its own. Even though it took my will to create it, it's still not entirely there yet. It can be led astray by someone else. And if I remember correctly, every type of nobody corresponds to a member of Organization 13. So the Dusks
Yeah,
are Roxases, if I remember correctly. I'd have to look that up again.
yeah,
But as far as like
I forget about
real
that.
world applications, I mean, you've
I
got
thought of
your
one.
typical mythology of, the doppelganger or the fetch or something like that,
Oh
where
yeah.
there is someone out there who acts like you, looks like you, but is not you. They're acting in more evil ways. Your Jekyll and Hyde kind of situation, except there's a literal split between those bodies in the situation. So yeah.
Yeah. So just to expound on that a little bit, the nobodies, most of them look like, what we see on the screen here or some kind of variation of that, where they're just kind of white monster looking creatures with different symbols on them. The really powerful ones, though, their will was so strong it maintained a real kind of body. So whenever Sora becomes a Heartless in the first game, which, yeah, spoilers, I guess, but guys, come on. At this point, if you didn't know, you didn't know. Whenever he becomes Heartless, the second game, you start off, you play as Roxas, who you find out was the nobody created when Sora became a Heartless, which is why they needed to kind of reintroduce Roxas back into Sora for Sora to be kind of his own complete thing. And then you find out Roxas is another person and also is Sora, and I don't know, it's wild, it's weird. But that's where Organization 13 are all people who look like people, but they're really nobodies. And what's interesting is that they go around and they talk about they don't remember their real name, or they're doing this thing, guys. They have to do this thing. Like, they don't actually have any true identity in of themselves, right? They're just will with body, which means they're really easy to manipulate and control if you're Xehanort, for example. But yeah, no, I don't know. It's fascinating how it all works. I see it in our world in the sense that there are plenty of people out there who have a lot of will, have a lot of passion, but don't really have anything that they're putting it in. And for me, we're going to do this a little bit later, but the soul, when you look at like when Greeks use the word soul, which is, when we're talking about the Greek language, that's the whole New Testament. It's that thing which made you lively. And that's where when we talk about like music having soul, it's because it's lively music. So when I think of that thing that makes me lively, yeah, Kingdom Hearts is part of my soul. It does give me a sense of life. Like, it fuels me. And I think that's the thing that's interesting about these nobodies are they're not just heartless. I mean, what's ironic, they don't only not have a heart because they're not heartless, but you know what I mean. They don't have hearts.
Yes.
They also don't seem like they have any spirit. They don't have any soul. There's nothing that makes them lively. They just exist, which is why they're all usually pretty cold. Which it's funny because I think today, a lot of times your heroes are these cold scientists that don't really have a personality or a lot of passion. They're just cold scientists who logically, this is the right thing to do. And I'm like, Tony Stark, Sherlock Holmes, all that. And I'm like, I kind of like that the bad guys are that. And here, the good guys are the ones with all the spirit. I mean, you look at Sora, Donald, and Goofy, they're having fun. Their ship runs on smiles and laughs. And it's like, oh, yeah, this is what good guys look like. Good guys aren't these stoic, cold, hard, like heartless whatevers. Good guys are happy, joyful, love, and want to spread those things. Barbara, sorry, I'm not trying to take all the airtime. I'm really passionate about this game.
No, you're fine. I kind of just wanted to add in that when you think of like a nobody, it's especially when you come to Organization 13, you kind of see that one, they don't really have any memory from before they were born as a heartless. I mean, a nobody. I'm sorry. But
Yeah,
it's
terms are
almost
hard.
like they've forgotten how to show emotion. Period. There's a few scenes in Kingdom Hearts 2 where it's like Demix was pretending to laugh or pretending to be happy, but then he just suddenly drops all of his emotion. Or Larzine is just completely witchy, but
psychopathic.
she seems to be doing it because she thinks that's what she's supposed to be doing, not necessarily she feels that way.
Yeah, I think a lot of us do stuff like that in the real world, where we're doing stuff or mimicking things that other people do because we're kind of told that that's a thing. Like, Christians act this way, so I guess I should act this way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, also, we have to consider our sources, too. We're told, and they are told themselves by Xemnas, hey, nobodies don't have a heart. You don't have emotions. Well, as we find in Dream Drop Distance, that's not true. They don't start off with a heart. They learn along the way. Yeah, and Axel, becoming Lee again. Then no one calling him by his real name. It's just funny on its own. But like they learn over time. Like, they start as this kind of husk with nothing, but become something along the way. So it's not like nobodies have no hope of ever achieving anything, but Xemnas tries to keep them that way because they're more controllable that way.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, no, that's another very fascinating part of the lore. Oh, man. All right, let's jump to the last one before we get to our conversations, Dichotomy, Trichotomy. We're going to talk about the Unversed. I don't want to put Barbara on the spot, so I'm going to put Christian on the spot. Could you remind me, because I don't even remember, where do we first see the Unversed and how are they originally explained?
Well, we first see them in Birth by Sleep, and they're essentially the Heartless of the game, destined to Heartless haven't been released from the realm of darkness at this point in history. Like all the worlds at this point in time, they're supposed to just stay in their own world, but only like Keyblade Masters are the ones who are supposed to be able to go out and fight evil and all that, make sure the worlds are in where they're supposed to be. So like I said earlier, like they are born from Xehanort experimenting on Ventus, who is one of your three main protagonists for Birth by Sleep. He has lost kind of memories of who he is, dealing with that amnesia, trying to find who he wants to be in this world. We'll come to find out this mysterious guy who looks like Sora along the way because of shenanigans that happen within the game, where Ventus ties himself to Sora's heart and all this jazz.
Fun times.
He, as long as he is alive, and the negativity that was caused by him being forced out of Aventus's body, all the darkness inside of Ventus creates the Unversed, and as long as he is around, Unversed exist. So for a time, Vanitas is kind of put away. That's why they're not in Kingdom Hearts 1 through Birth by Sleep. Excuse me, Dream Drop Distance outside of Birth by Sleep. They show up in 3 again because Vanitas himself shows back up.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Kingdom Hearts 3 was very much like end game of the Kingdom Hearts series, where you see everything coming back and colliding, and if you didn't play the side games and stuff, you're kind of like, wait a minute, who's that? Who's this? What's going on? Huh? But yeah, man, it was a lot of fun. All these characters coming back, all the villains being back. Yeah, the Unversed, I find it really interesting. I think what I find interesting is the term negative emotions. They're only brought into existence by negative emotions, because in my mind, and maybe this is just a me thing, I can't think of real negative emotions, because sometimes anger is a positive thing and it's something that you should have. Jesus had that, right? Like sometimes you should be sad, and sad is actually good for you. So I'm like, I think maybe it's because I'm thinking too non-binary, because I'm like, what do you mean negative emotions? Barbara, how do you feel about the term and what they did with the Unversed here?
Well, I feel like when everyone refers to negative emotions, they always think of something that's, affected them in a negative way. But I mean, if you've seen the movie like Inside Out, sometimes sadness or negative emotions, it helps people process, and it helps, people come to terms with things like grief. Or so when you think of negative emotions, they're not always going to have a negative impact on you. Like you said, it's good to have anger, it's good to have grief, it's good to have sadness, but it's also like maybe depression or guilt or envy or greed, stuff like that too, which are definitely not good things to have.
Yeah, it's the sometimes part that
right.
causes the actual. Like, it is good to grieve. That meant that you loved that person or that thing or whatever so much that it is hurting you, but it is not good to remain there. It is not good to let that control you. And that's where the negative part of that comes in, is when you let that something that could be used for good linger. Or you feel righteous anger as like, oh no, there are refugees in the world, and why isn't anyone doing anything? But you lash out at the wrong person who has nothing to do with the problem, because you yourself had just been mired in this negativity. That's when something like an Unversed could come into being.
Yeah, yeah, and it just, man, it's interesting because like, I even think that some positive emotions, that things that we typically think of positive, can be negative. If I love something that I should not love, like, yeah, there's plenty of things like that, like that can be a negative emotion. I think what was interesting is it has to be a really strong negative emotion. It doesn't necessarily, my understanding is, it didn't necessarily matter how negative it was as much as how strong the emotion was for it to come into existence. Is that kind of the correct understanding, Christian?
Oh, yeah, I mean, especially, well, I just played this not too long ago. It's when Aqua is in Cinderella's world, and Lady Tremaine's anger at not having one of her daughters like be chosen as the princess of the land actually draws an Unversed to attack Cinderella. Like, she wasn't controlling it, but because her feelings were just that dark, like
Yeah.
Aqua notices, like, man, this lady's pretty dang dark. And it's because of that actually draws it there. So that's where the power comes from. Like, she had no idea Unversed exists, but her feelings were just that strong enough, it brought one there.
Yeah. Yeah. Man. All interesting stuff. And I think part of what makes me think tie this to the dichotomy, trichotomy arguments we have within Christianity is really it's because it's not very clear in the game either, right? Because we talked about earlier, you can have summons, and that's basically someone's spirit was strong enough that it comes out. But you also have your body turns to nobodies when your heart becomes a heartless, and it's like, okay, so originally it seemed like there was this dichotomy. Your heart becomes a heartless, your body's left behind. So that means in the world of Kingdom Hearts, hearts and bodies make up human. But then you find out if your emotions are strong enough, they can become its own thing. If you're completely destroyed, your spirit can be summoned through, magic and different stuff because some part of you is still left behind. So are there spirits? Is there just heart, body? I mean, what is going on? How would you guys, if you had to attempt to describe the parts that make up a human in Kingdom Hearts, not real life, we're not going to go there yet. Let's start with Kingdom Hearts. What makes up a person? Barbara, would you care to start us on this one?
Well, like the three main things in Kingdom Hearts I've noticed is definitely like the body, the heart, and then the spirit. But when you think about that, your body is just like an empty husk, which is then filled with heart and spirit. When your heart is gone, that's not a big deal because if you have a strong enough will, you can stay alive as a nobody. But is that really living? You're not. You have to start again from scratch as an empty husk. But then your spirit, if you have a strong enough spirit, you could be summoned and you could still be helpful. You have memories, you have emotions. It's complicated, but I think in a good way.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And it's hard because I think a lot of people would skip the spirit thing because, summoned were just kind of, we wanted to have a cool magic thing that included more Disney characters. But when I look at these other things, like it definitely seems like in the Kingdom Hearts world, there is more than just heart and body or nobody. Like there's more than that. It seems like to me. Christian, what's your analysis of how people are made up of specifically in the Kingdom Hearts universe?
It's essentially three parts, as we've said. It's heart, body, and soul. Now, I did not know this information offhand. That's why I had to look it up before we did this. Hearts are actually one of the most debated topics within the fandom and within the games themselves, which is why Xehanort does what he does, because he is intrigued by the heart. That's why Ansem the Wise did what he did. It's like, hey, what is a heart? And it kind of seems to be like one of these things that really it's just kind of metaphysical. It doesn't really have like a strict definition because hearts can be made of both light and dark. And that's one of the things like we see Riku along the way. You would think darkness would just be evil because all we've seen is darkness being used as evil, but Riku is able to use his heart, channel the darkness in a way that can help other people. Versus, Sora more likely is going to be going through light. And, Kingdom Hearts is light, of course. It's also, Kingdom Hearts is also a place, a thing, an idea, and a state of mind. And whatever else you want to add to that list. Then we get to the body. The body is just the literal physical thing that keeps everything inside. But the soul in Kingdom Hearts is what actually gives you life. If I'm reading these things correctly.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting. I think that's probably about how I would explain it. It's just somewhere between y'all's. I'd probably say spirit instead of soul, just because I haven't seen the word soul in Kingdom Hearts that much. But I could be
Secret
mistaken.
Ansem Report 4 says otherwise, according to the wiki.
There we go. There we go.
Okay.
That's right. You can actually collect secret reports from Ansem all throughout the first games. I
but
think
who
it's
actually
just because
reads
I'm
them,
used
though?
to. Yeah, that's true. Not many people actually read them. I think I've read them once, but I was like 13. You got to cut me a break. No, I know. I think it's all really interesting how they make it up. And I think it's interesting that in this, a heart isn't, your physical heart. Like it doesn't look like the guy pulled it out of Temple of Doom, like it's very much more a what makes up your soul. And what also interesting when we're talking about like light dark thing is in Kingdom Hearts, you do have good and evil. You have that, but it's not the same thing as light and dark. Because you see the good guys using light and dark, but you also see Ansem and Xehanort finding a way to use the light for the bad guy's side. So it's kind of like, yeah, light and dark, good and evil, two different things in this universe. That also would be a fascinating episode. So, guys, drop down below. Let me know that you want me to do that so I can keep doing Kingdom Hearts episodes.
Especially if
All
you
right,
don't
so
already have
let's.
like 10 other
I
signups
have
on the
somebody on the topic list,
topics
and
issue.
Christian's like the old Christian and James are the only ones who's really signed up. Christian, let's go into actual theology. We're going to leave the Kingdom Hearts world for a second and see how it compares to what we all think about the dichotomy or trichotomy of man when it comes to Christian doctrine, what makes up a human. And as we go along, this is one of the few things that well, I'll admit that I think the further we progress in science, the harder it is to make these distinctions. Because you find out a lot of the things that people thought of as soul, well, different parts of your brain can actually make up what we're talking about. So it is a physical thing that's happening in your body that's making this thing that we think of as soul as happening, or spirit, or any of that kind of thing. Which I think does make this complicated, right? Because now we can't just say all of our emotions that's coming from my spirit. I'm like, well, actually, hormones being released that trigger something in my mind that makes me feel this way. And it's like, well, so is that really my body doing it? I mean, where does that fall? I think it gets a little bit trickier when we start considering these things. And I do want to take that into account. I don't think Kingdom Hearts takes that into account at all. I was going to say very well, but I just don't think it takes it into account at all. Um, and originally, early on in the church, usually we have the trichotomy set up where, people have read the Bible and it talks about loving God with all your heart, mind, soul, strength. And they kind of come up with this theory. Different places in the Bible talks about your spirit. So the theory originally, or not originally, there's always been this debate. It was more heavy sided towards trichotomy. We're looking at like Anselm, we're looking at like Augustine, believing that there is my body, there is my soul, which is that thing that can go up to heaven, that thing that makes me lively. And then there's my spirit, which is a separate thing from my soul. And we get to some of that when we look at like the book of Hebrews, different places where it talks about separating your soul and spirit. And then there's all these debates of, well, if it is a trichotomy, what's a soul and what's a spirit? What makes the difference up, right? Which is all fascinating stuff. As we've come along, and Martin Luther, different people, the Reformation came up, the dichotomy setup has been more popularized of saying that humans, this is within Christianity, are made up of bodies and souls, and that's it. There's no separation. There's no separate thing called spirit. And that's kind of the debate. Is it dichotomy? Is it trichotomy? What makes up a human in the according to Christian doctrine? Well, we haven't settled it yet. We're still debating. I'd love to hear you guys take. I'll let you know I am in the trichotomy camp. I do think there's a separate thing between my soul and my spirit. I think I misspoke earlier. I think I would say my spirit is that thing that goes up to heaven. The soul is that thing that's what makes me lively, which is what I would say is constructed of like Kingdom Hearts, church, my friends like Ashley, all these things build up my soul. That is that thing which makes me lively. And my spirit is that thing that connects with God, speaks to the Holy Spirit, and then one day goes up to heaven. And my body is that thing that contains both of those for me. Like, I don't think that they're all separate. I would say that my body, my soul, my spirit are all connected. I'm not this body that just happens to contain a thing. I am an embodied soul and an embodied spirit is how I would view it. Christian, how are you answering this question? Dichotomy, trichotomy, something else?
But before that, I do want to say Anselm is my favorite early church father. Love his writings.
You knew what I was trying to. Well, actually, it is Anselm, isn't it? Isn't that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Anselm the Wise.
No, I mean church father. There was a church father that was just Anselm, right?
I
I
mean,
don't
sure,
know.
if you
Keep
say
going.
so.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
I'll be perfectly honest. This is
Anselm.
something
I forgot
that
the L.
Anselm. Yeah, you were on your Kingdom Hearts mind. It's not your fault. Uh, this has been one of those things that I haven't wrestled with that much. Not to say I've never applied my mind towards it. I do. At the end of the day, between dichotomy and trichotomy, I lean surprisingly against Joshua in dichotomy. But it's also one of those things. This is not a tier one issue of whether or not. Not to say this doesn't matter, but as far as like shaping your church and what can be, you can have these opposing viewpoints in the same church. I'll put it that way. Whether if it's just body and soul slash spirit, or is it body, soul, and spirit? I combine the two because I don't really see too much that makes them different when I read scripture. But I know plenty of other people smarter than me have looked at the exact same book and said, well, this is defined here. Like the basic idea, and I mean basic. So I'm compiling a lot of really smart stuff into simplistic processes here. The soul basically equals consciousness. That's you being aware of yourself, your surroundings, your ability to do things. It's kind of closer to sentience versus sapience. And the spirit kind of things is the ability to perceive and wrestle with the supernatural. So
Yeah.
I see those two as one and the same. Other people do not. So I'm going to say dichotomy for right now, but I'm also not willing to take a bullet for it.
Yeah, I'm not willing to take a bullet for either. I'm still on the, I think, trichotomy. Barbara, where are you at?
I don't know. I kind of disagree. I go with the trichotomy. It's more so because I see it.
Yeah,
I
Christian.
definitely see the. It is not just because I'm disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing, but for the sake of disagreeing, it's because I definitely
Barbara,
I see the line. So when I think of the three, I see the body as an all-encompassing figure. It's the physical manifestation of something that holds a soul and a spirit. Now, the soul is what is really your emotions and your passion, like your interests or how you live your everyday life. Whether it's very little passion for the day or you wake up in the morning with a giant smile on your face. But the spirit is, like Christian said, is how you view the supernatural, the paranormal. It's some have a very soft sense when it comes to that, and they can't really sense different, other spirits or God himself or angels or anything like that. But there are some people who can feel the hand of God, who hear his whispers and who can John sometimes hears my soul whispering to him and I him because we are one and we're soulmates. But it's also with our children. We sometimes ask each other, hey, what did you say? Did you hear that? And it's like our child's voice from across the room or in a different room. We're hearing their spirit. But it's also that is what the part of us that would essentially go to heaven after our physical body passes on. It's a higher form kind of.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw a bunch of wrenches into everything here to kind of explain why this has been so debated throughout all Christian history and why I don't think any of us would take a bullet for our positions. But no, I do think all that's really interesting what Barbara was talking about. And as someone who grew up Pentecostal, I definitely do have a bias here where I don't usually talk about this kind of stuff, but I'm going to do it on a podcast. Oh no. I've seen angels, right? I've seen before where someone's bone was clearly snapped in two, set back into place and healed, and I'm like, I've seen too much. I lived through a car accident where the doctors said it was a miracle. The other guy's lawyer was like, let's get one thing straight first. It was a miracle you survived. And I'm like, well, if the other guy's lawyer says it, that's the worst thing for him to say possible. So at that point, it's like, I feel like it's just, it's a miracle. So I've experienced too much and seen too much to not believe in some kind of spiritual world. So that is also where I'm like, yeah, no, I definitely have a spirit and it definitely intermingles with other spiritual things and connects and has this experience with other spirits. And, I believe in a spiritual realm very strongly. And yeah, I'm biased. So I got to throw that out there. But yeah, there are a lot of different issues. And for me, one of it is the things that I contribute to soul is just something because I can explain it with science, right? A lot of the stuff that my soul figures out, even like when you speak in tongues, they've done a read and parts of your brain highlight that usually don't highlight and it highlights more. And to me, that's evidence that something's really going on there. But also, whatever is truly, really going on of God interacting with you, it's interacting with your body. So that has to be something separate than the soul, as far as I'm concerned, which is hard to explain. So a lot of my wanting to go to trichotomy is because there's definitely this thing that's a soul where God's interacting with me, but that's definitely more tied to my body than what I would say my spirit is. But also, here's where we get annoying. Our bodies rise again in the end. So maybe it's all embodied, and that's why our bodies rise again at the end, because we need our bodies for our souls to exist, because our souls are embodied things. You also have where some of your early church fathers didn't like the idea of dichotomy, because our souls, a lot of people truly in the Bible, you see they had a wicked soul, or they were able to do evil things because of what was in their soul. And they said, well, if your soul and spirit are the same, and that's the thing that communicates with God, and it can be evil, well, God can't communicate with evil, so that doesn't make any sense. So they had to have some other thing that's communicating with God that isn't harmed by the evil that was within our soul. And that's where you get some of the trichotomy beliefs also. But then when you come to our dichotomy stuff, um, it seems very weird to kind of it almost makes more sense to just kind of wrap your some of the stuff that we think of as soul up as just that's just body. There's body, and then there's that thing that's not body that goes to heaven. So there's a little bit more of a common sense, straightforward approach to that too. That also makes a lot of sense. Like I can't be like any of this. I don't look at it and go, yeah, no, that doesn't make sense. All of the views, I'm like, no, that makes perfect sense. Did any of these kind of thoughts of like how do we communicate with God if we have an evil soul, or why is our body does our body necessary to raise again? Like have those questions ever come up to you guys whenever you're wrestling with these kind of ideas?
Well, first, there was one thing you mentioned there. I think that was kind of ridiculous to say, not that you were espousing it, but the idea that God can't contact with evil. Well, then God can't contact anybody, in my opinion, based on how things go. Like every single person God talked to in Scripture that was
Well, he was only talking to the non-evil part of them. That's why it's separate from the soul. I think Christian froze.
I
the
think he
name
did
Jesus
too.
Christ had an evil spirit. How that works? Yeah, I did go for a little bit there. So we'll have to figure out how to post that later. So how much did you hear?
I think I got the gist.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. What about you, Barbara? Anything as far as like that kind of stuff? Have you ever wrestled with any of these ideas or thoughts or been challenged by any of this before?
Well, early on, before I, professed myself to be a Christian, it was a lot more confusing, I want to say, because it's, playing Kingdom Hearts, I'm playing it as, a 10, 12, 13-year-old non-Christian. In fact, I was actually an atheist when I was younger. It kind of opened up myself to the fact, well, the spirit's just something that lives inside your body and it doesn't really go anywhere. And when you think of soul, it's just, a type of music. That's really what you think about. And
Yeah.
after you just open yourself up to spirituality and to God himself, it's a completely different picture.
Yeah.
Because then,
Yeah.
yeah.
It actually it makes me think of everyone's gonna love to hear me say this name. This should also be part of the drinking game. Take a shot every time I say C.S. Lewis.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, Will
It's
has one where
C.S.
it's every time I say
Lewis,
Kingdom Hearts or
Kingdom
Darkwing Duck.
Hearts,
Now we're adding
and
C.S.
Darkwing Duck.
Lewis. Sorry, Will. Um, but
Yeah, he smashed it. He
his
didn't
book
even be
Surprised by
listening to
Joy.
this one.
Yeah, he looked at this episode and said, "I'll take a shot and move on." No, but Surprised by Joy. C.S. Lewis kind of does like this autobiography, but it's not really about. Yeah, it's whatever. But he describes these feelings he has, where something outside of this world grasps him, and he describes it as joy and something that's
Mm-hmm.
separate from happiness to him. And I think that's the kind of moment we're talking about, where there's something in you, whether it's from a book or
Mm-hmm.
something else, that's like just you can't describe that feeling because it's like almost otherworldly. And maybe we
Exactly.
can get a brain scanner and see what parts of the brain light up and we see what that is. But when you're on ground experiencing it, you know that that is something more. And maybe it is within my
Mm-hmm.
body, but it's interacting with something outside my body. And what's funny is, he describes all these different places where he saw it and he sparked and that's where he felt God. Sometimes it's playing Kingdom Hearts. I get this feeling and I'm like, oh wow, yeah, that moved me, right? Deeply moved me when I see like stuff like what happened with Kyrie and Zora. Or, Doctor Who recently. We see the doctor gets to heal. I'm not going to give anything other than that, but yeah, it moved me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And these are secular things. But then once you kind of realize that what it is moving you is more than what's here, and you kind of search that out and you discover God, you discover the Bible, you realize, no, there's a
Mm-hmm.
reason this stuff is moving me. So maybe soul and the spirit's the same, and that thing that's moving me is able to be read by a scanner, but that's also just because I have an embodied soul. Maybe it's something separate. Maybe there is my body, and then there's also my spirit, and that spirit is triggered by what my body is observing and what's going on, and it's telling me there's something more that I need to yearn for. Um, Sorry, not to go on the thing, but it's interesting to think about these things. Now that we talked about both, do you guys think Kingdom Hearts did an okay job? Like, I know they weren't trying to do Christian theology, but as far as like if we compare the two, is there much separate from how people view this stuff to how it works in Kingdom Hearts world? Christian?
I'm going to say ultimately no. I love this series to death. It is a convoluted jungled mess that if you don't actually read things, you may understand 25% of what's going on. If you read things, you may understand 80%. Like,
I was gonna say
I
half,
love
but
it.
yeah.
Yeah. It's not as bad as like a FromSoft game where if you definitely don't read anything, you won't understand a single thing that's going on. No Dark Souls, no Bloodborne, no Elden Ring. You're not going to know nothing. Or
Oh,
Sekiro.
man.
Like, this is handled better if you understand things, if you read things. But the way the series itself explains things, no, I can't in good faith say it does it extremely well.
Well, I'll be controversial here because I think I'm the least conservative one of the group today. I also don't think the Bible does very good job of explaining the separation of soul and spirit or the body because it kind of just throws these terms around like we're supposed to know what they are. And I don't feel like the Bible has any clear definition or index of let me explain what we meant when we said soul here. And I think maybe it's intentional. Maybe it's not about understanding exactly what parts make up a man and rather understanding that I am a true embodied person and part of that person includes a soul and or spirit that yearns for something more. So, I think Kingdom Hearts and the Bible both don't really explain it, but do get at something of there being more to a person than just person. Barbara, what's your take?
I think the game definitely did a very good job of confusing everyone. But at the same time, I mean, you're right.
True.
You're right. I mean, I almost at times I wish the Bible had like an index or a glossary or something. And I know some of like the learning Bibles do at the very the bottom of the footnotes. But at the same time, a lot of words are used, intersparingly. They use them interchangeably too. And it's like, well, if you're going to use spirit and soul like interchangeably, is there really a true definition for either one?
Yeah. And if you're in the inerrancy camp and you come to Hebrews 4 and you're like, wait a minute, what do you mean divide spirit and soul? This whole time you've been using them interchangeably. How could they be different? Maybe that's the point. Maybe they're not different. And the Bible is so good that it splits apart things that we can't even tell a difference in. I don't know. But it is fascinating that the author used both terms there because you're like, wait a minute. Huh? And it's fascinating that Kingdom Hearts has, nobodies and heartless, but also, you might be able to summon someone if their spirit's strong enough. Like, wait a minute, their spirit's involved too? What? Who knows? And I think that's the perfect ending. This is basically dummy for theology, Christian. Where at the end, we're just going to say, who knows? Figure it out, guys. Here's 3 questions.
You successfully hoodwinked me into doing one.
Oh, man.
With that lure of Kingdom Hearts, you planted something on my head. Kingdom Hearts right in front of me. I'm just out of grasp. I can't reach it, and I keep running after it.
Oh, man. Perfect. Just imagine if you followed a story where the love interest have spent 20 years trying to get together now, and they still have yet to figure it out.
I want them to eat that dang fruit.
Man.
The Palpu fruit, yeah.
Yes. And on that note, let's jump to our wrap up. Christian, would you go ahead and start us off with a recommendation today?
Yeah, sure. I have not played the games. Let me preface it with that. But I did watch the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, and I actually really enjoyed it. It's not my favorite by any stretch of the imagination. It's not going to be on my top 100 list anytime soon. But as someone who knows nothing about the lore or anything, like I walked in, there were things I didn't understand, but I had a good time. It's not the most solid movie in the world. I'd probably, fire the scriptwriter who made it, but I had a good time.
A lot of people probably feel similarly about Kingdom Hearts, unfortunately. Barbara, you have a recommendation for everyone today?
Yeah. My kids and I, although they're probably way too young to watch it, we've been watching One Piece, the anime.
Yes.
Nice.
We are, I think, 18 episodes in. And we've got 1,000 to go.
They got to start somewhere.
Yeah, listen,
I mean, for
the great part about One Piece is that you'll never finish One Piece.
Oh, we've been doing 2 episodes a day, so we'll be done in about 20 years, maybe?
Maybe.
There you go.
Probably not. You'll just catch up to where we are now in 20 years. Then you'll have 20 more years of stuff to catch up on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what makes it great. I mean, You always have something to
Yeah.
fall back on.
Yeah. I actually reminded myself earlier I was recording Comic Book Catch Up with Will and Kevin, and we talked about some different comics and stuff we're into, and he brought up some Harley Quinn comics, Kevin did, which reminded me of G. Willow Wilson's run with Poison Ivy. Yeah, you know, it's definitely not for kids. It, yeah, definitely has different values than I do, but very strong feminist point of view, very strong, hey, let's not be jerks and destroy the world for our children's kind of view. I thought it was, I think it's a really good run. It's not a new run by any means, but if you haven't picked it up yet, G. Willow Wilson's an incredible author. I definitely recommend picking up her, at least some of the volumes of Poison Ivy by G. Willow Wilson. All right. So with that, guys, thank you guys for checking the episode out. You know, stay tuned. You can stay tuned after the episode, and we're going to discuss what we think were the hardest bad guys to fight. Heartless Nobodies, Unversed. What did we have the hardest time with when we played the game? So stay tuned. We'll do that for our Captivate and Patron listeners after the episode. So be sure to subscribe. Also, make sure you rate our show on Podchaser, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or if you're on YouTube, smash that like and subscribe button. And of course, we need you to do one very, very important thing for us. And to remember, we're all the chosen people, a geekdom of priests.